now they have, root access to your router, and they're using that to let themselves in. And then how are you going to catch that, right? If you don't have a way of like looking at what's really happening on the endpoint and trusting it. And that's the problem, right? Is you can't trust an infected device to faithfully report what's going on. And so EDR can't cover that, one, because it doesn't install, and two, if it doesn't matter, if you can't monitor an infected endpoint with an infected endpoint. Rocking around RSA, like talking to vendors, it doesn't seem like anyone has a perfect solution for answering the question, how do I know my core infrastructure is not also compromised?
Who says tech can't be human?
What's going on, Hacker Valley fam? Welcome back to the show. I am super excited to be bringing on a very special guest for this episode because we've been knowing each other for a while. We met through many different chance encounters, one being the Cybersecurity Creative Mastermind that Hacker Valley hosts, another being Sands, then another being Black Hat. We just see each other all over the place. My special guest for this episode is John Hubbard, Cyber Defense Curriculum Lead for many, many different SANS programs that fall under the cyber defense curriculum at SANS. But John, you've been on the podcast before. Super excited to have you back on. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Always a fun time being here, Ron.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it. I've tried to wrap my mind around the cyber defense curriculum at SANS a few different times, mainly through speaking to you. And it seems like the program's always growing and expanding. So what does the cyber defense curriculum kind of entail currently?
So right now, we have about, I would say 17, classes. So one of the biggest curriculums in terms of course numbers. And the way SANS breaks it down is like we have the offensive ops curriculum, we have cloud, we have leadership, forensics, and then cyber defense is the one that I'm the lead for. And that basically means trying to corral the best classes that are the biggest interest to the market. And what we have right now is a whole broad spectrum of things. Everything from our more generalist classes like the 401, our boot camp with GSEC that a whole bunch of people take as like an inroad into the InfoSec industry, all the way to specialized things. SOC classes are the one thing I would kind of focus on. We have threat hunting, we have detection engineering, we've got classes on automation with Python. We have some new classes, actually. We have a class on Linux for information security professionals written by Mark Baggett. We got a class from Tony Turner on securing the cybersecurity supply chain, which is a really important thing we've seen in the news a lot recently. And all sorts of interesting kind of AI classes popping up as well. Sec 595 from Dave Holzer is one of our newest ones that's like a big hit right now because it's machine learning and AI and writing like advanced detections with some serious like math and firepower behind it. So really cool stuff, and always kind of trying to find more and what people are interested in and stay on top of it.
I was gonna say something about AI, but I was refraining. But you brought it up, so since you brought it up, let's go ahead and jump into AI. I feel like that's had my attention so hard the past year, and I've been wondering, the places where AI can be applied in cybersecurity, and it sounds like you all have already created some content around some of the things that are out there. So what exists already?
So what we have already, the one class that I just mentioned, 595, is like one that is a deep dive, right? Like it assumes a little bit of Python knowledge, and it gets into using Jupyter notebooks and developing custom algorithms for like detecting network anomalies. And the idea here is like there's a lot of APT groups that have these tools that no one's ever seen before, right? And so one of the things they might be doing is using one particular field or one particular subset of a network layer in a way that's unusual. And it's not going to be like, oh, we're just going to write a snort alert and look for the evil thing in the domain name or whatever, right? It's going to be something very, very like deep in the weeds. And so looking at these algorithms, we can train them and say like, hey, this is what normal TCP looks like, normal HTTP, the fields within it, and all sorts of other stuff like that. And come up with some really unique and accurate ways of catching stuff, even though no one's ever seen it before. And saying like, hey, this is different is usually the first step towards getting to, hey, this is different and it's bad and it's a serious problem. So we have that kind of thing. And that's what that class is all about. And we also have some stuff on the horizon too that I can't say a whole lot about, but we definitely have more content on the earlier part of the spectrum, like getting into AI that's being developed right now, getting people more familiar with like, prompt engineering and all that kind of basic stuff. So keep your eyes peeled on that because we certainly have way more to go. And basically every class has added AI as well, right? We got open source intelligence classes that talk about going through massive reams of data with AI and breaking it down. And yeah, there's just tons and tons of capabilities there. And we're just starting to see what it can do.
If you're not looking at AI, you totally should, because it could change the way that you do your work. But looking at what already is out there as well could change the way you do your work as well. Because you're describing having pre-existing tools and frameworks that have been used and taught to show how to find needles in a haystack. So if you were someone that was starting their journey on learning how to use automation this new way, whether it be through machine learning or AI, you just want to like take information and make magic out of it, would you start with using some of those existing kind of capabilities and whatnot, or would you focus your attention on prompt engineering?
I think there's a little bit of both, but I think starting with prompt engineering and like the chat GPT type tools of the world is the logical place for a beginner because it's so accessible, right? You can ask a question of fairly simple nature and get a significant answer. Some of the demonstrations, like I've worked in classes, like taking obfuscated malware code, right, from a macro or from some kind of JavaScript or whatever, tossing it in there, and it just does, here you go, here's the answer, right? And that's something that like already as a new analyst, you might not know how to do manually. And so that just becomes a very easy and super practical use case. But there's a whole bunch of places you can go with that, right? And depending on if you're trying to do process improvement or if you're trying to do technical solution development, or if you're trying to just answer a simple question about one case you have, if you're trying to lead with it, like there's a lot of places you can go with that. So it's a little bit, it depends, right? As every question's answer is.
Yeah. I think that's a really good breakdown. And, like a lot of the expert systems that I built previously needed an expert to review the results. And I think if you were to focus on LLMs, it would be especially advantageous for someone that is newer in the field because, like you're saying, they don't know how to verify the results of an alert or an incident. You kind of need some assistance or a lot of conversations or some experience from the past.
Yeah, there's there's the double-edged sword of AI, right? When it comes to this stuff is, yes, a new analyst can throw some obfuscated code in there and good chance it's going to be correct. But I also make a point to do a demonstration in class where I say like, all right, here's something, you just got the answer manually, toss it in and however you might think to prompt it and see if it gives you the right answer. And in the way that I usually prompt it, it actually doesn't give you the right answer. And it's 100% confident, right? And it's completely wrong. So there is like I think we still have to approach it with come up with an answer on your own and then use that as a point of reference to like gut check what you came up with, but don't just blindly trust it. Cause as we all probably have seen, it can hallucinate and really lead you off track as well.
Yeah, it does. But, I think that in some situations, I don't mind the hallucination. Like, give me something. Maybe it's wrong, but I do like the attempt. One, thing that I'm always curious about, especially whether you're using it in cyber or not, is what are your personal use cases? So like, how are you using AI, whether it be in cyber or even automate some of your personal activities?
Yeah, great question. There is a breakdown of kind of each stage of a project that I do that I try to remember to use AI for at this case. Usually when I'm coming up with something, there's that very initial stage where you have to generate a lot of ideas, right? And so the brainstorming stage, like AI is absolutely great for that. No need to worry about hallucinations. It's just like, here's the kind of thing I want. Give me a giant pile of places I might start and then expand out your options, right? And then once I have something I think I like, and then I'll develop it a little bit more, then I use it for kind of refinement and say like, all right, here are some things that I think are the best options here. Why might I choose one of these or the other to help me get an idea of what, might be the smartest answer of all the ones that it did generate after I cut it down. And then in the final stage of something, when I'm like, if I'm writing a report or an article or whatever it happens to be, there's also that like spell check and grammar check kind of thing, or like tone or like anything, right? It's just the polish side where it can give recommendations. And all along that whole spectrum, like you don't really have to worry a whole lot about accuracy if you have some general sense about what it's suggesting and just saying, does that make sense or not? I find the whole process can be helped to some degree as long as you keep the human piece in it.
I need to jump in for a second and share some details about a special group that we've created for you, our listeners. We understand the importance of creativity in cybersecurity, and Hacker Valley has created a special Cyber Creators Mastermind. Each month, we meet and discuss how to break down technical concepts through stories, the intricacies and opportunities of using audio and video to highlight what's important in cybersecurity, and we share how you can use content to highlight the hard work that you put into your craft. You can check out the mastermind by visiting hackervalley.com/mastermind. We'd love to help unlock your creative potential and would love to see you there. Considering the fact that we have hallucinations with the output of LLMs especially, do you think it's something that we could trust in the SOC?
I think there are a lot of places it's always going to get better, right? So now, can we trust it? I think many times, yes, but certainly we see its limitations and it's still early stages. So that's to be expected. But, some of the things that I think about when I say that, I already said the one where it's obviously just de-obfuscating stuff wrong. That's one situation. But there's one that actually I ran into at RSA that I thought was a little bit more obscure. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was talking to somebody at one of the vendor booths and they were talking about how, everyone had their AI demo, right? And so this was a group that had an incident management system and ticketing and notes and all that kind of stuff in there. And they're like, oh yeah, you can just ask the AI, like if you're the CISO, hey, give me a report on all the analysts and which ones are the most efficient and the best ones, right? I'm like that sounds really good. But then when you think about it, like you're relying on AI to tell you like who's doing the best at their job, and you don't necessarily know how it's judging best. Like where my mind immediately went with that one is like, I think they had said something about who's the fastest at closing tickets. And I'm like, on its face, that sounds like a good thing. But that's one of those metrics where if you take it too far, then you might actually be asking who's blowing the work off and ripping through the tickets as fast as possible if it's not judging quality with it. And even if it tries to judge quality, is it right? And so there's like some of those high level, like seemingly magical questions that it might do a great job at, but it also might lead you down the wrong road. And the data behind it's like so intense and so complex to verify that I don't even know like how easy it will be to identify when it's wrong in those kind of situations.
What about the use cases that you think it's not ready for? It sounds like you can't trust it to give you something like a holistic picture end to end. What I've seen as well is people trying to string together many different AI systems to create an agent. And an agent, can do multiple tasks or work with different models or different prompts to give you back a more refined piece of response.
Yeah, I think that almost anything it can help with. I think where you might run into problems is if you either blindly trust the answer or if you automate it making decisions and then taking actions that could break something. The type of thing I'm always talking about is like, regardless of whether we're talking AI or not, right? If you're setting up like a SOAR platform workflow, would you want to say like, anytime something calls a file bad, immediately block it? Sounds great until it calls the wrong thing bad. I mean, we've recently seen what happens when an antivirus engine breaks, right? That could happen with AI if it makes the wrong decision and it blocks the wrong thing, takes down a company critical service. And so, most of the time it would probably get it right, but the one time it gets it wrong could be enough to justify not letting it do the rest of those things without a human in the loop. And that's where I think like that's probably the most critical piece of it right now is like it will greatly increase your speed, but I don't know that I would trust it to go fully autonomous.
I had an experience recently where I did allow the AI to go a little bit more autonomously than I typically would. I've been working on a Chrome extension for the past few months, and we've spoken about it offline during the masterminds. And I actually hired a developer because I couldn't get enough done on my own. So I hired a developer who's doing about 5 hours a week, did a great job. And then last week, my friend calls me and he tells me about this application called Cursor. And what Cursor will do, it will index all of your code. And I guess it uses its own custom embedding model. So it's kind of transformed into LLM language so it can access that information a little bit more efficiently. And it takes all of that information and you could chat with your files and you could say, hey, at documentation file, at style file, build a new JS or Python script that can do X, Y, and Z. And it'll use everything that it knows about your source code and then build out a new file or make revisions. And I tried it out and it worked 1-to-1 first time on 2 different scripts that I created. One in Python, one in JavaScript.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was lovely. It opened up my eyes to what the future could be like.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like, I'm still involved. I'm the one hitting approve or reject on that submission that the AI created.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where, if possible, I mean, and again, with or without AI, I think one of the solutions here is, I think something I got from actually one of the Google books. It was, I never remember the name of it, but it's one of the ones that have free, like on the same site as like the site reliability engineering book, but it's not that book, it's the other one. It was this idea they called like zero touch production, where I guess they manage Google servers by not directly logging in and doing things, but they like tell a script to do the thing.
Yeah.
But the script has built-in safeguards, right? And so same thing can happen in the SOC. The use case there is like, if you build yourself a SOAR workflow where you can hit a button and immediately block any domain name, well, what if an analyst types in the wrong domain name? Or in this case, AI, right? If you could already pre-establish a list of like, no matter what someone says, never block these things, never take these things out, assuming the list is trustworthy, that might be a solution to some of those problems and bring the problem down from like 99.9% all the way down to like 5 or 6 nines, right? Which maybe would never happen and you could run it like that. But
Yeah.
we got to come up with some more intelligent kind of ways to intercept some of those problems, and then maybe we can get there.
So let's talk about some of the things that you've experienced, that you've seen or even read about when it comes to things that could go wrong. Right before we hit record, you mentioned Volt Typhoon, and I figure we could just talk about it on air. So let's talk a little bit about Volt Typhoon, what it is, and why that was top of mind for you.
Yeah. So, to the discussion I had before about advanced AI detection and APT groups that have things we've never seen before, Volt Typhoon being one perfect example because it's been in the news a lot recently, but there's plenty of other groups out there capable of the same thing. Attackers want to get in and they want to stay in and they want to do it in a way you're never going to catch. Well, as the industry has brought up a whole bunch of awesome tools, EDR being the core one that I'm thinking about in this conversation here, visibility to your endpoints has become incredible, right? Now, certainly there are APT groups that know how to kill EDR and get around that sort of thing. But a lot of times, if they can't achieve the permission levels needed to do it, they could conceivably be caught. They don't like that. So where do you go if you are worried about EDR? You go to a place EDR can't run. And where is that, right? Your network devices, your infrastructure, things like that. And if they have some kind of 0 day where they can infect your router, your firewall, your switch, maybe your OT devices, IoT stuff, anything like that, like, how do you monitor those things and make sure they stay secure? Of course, you do build hardening and you do secure configuration and logging, but like time after time, we see these tools where they get in and then they have a 0 day and they root it and they disable those things silently. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have some kind of check to say, hey, this was reporting logs and now it's not, that could be a problem. Or there's the like, they got in, the logs continue to work just fine, but now they have, root access to your router and they're using that to let themselves in. And then how are you going to catch that, right? If you don't have a way of like looking at what's really happening on the endpoint and trusting it. And that's the problem, right? Is you can't trust an infected device to faithfully report what's going on. And so EDR can't cover that, one, because it doesn't install. And two, if it doesn't matter, you can't monitor an infected endpoint with an infected endpoint. Rocking around RSA, like talking to vendors, it doesn't seem like anyone has a perfect solution for answering the question, how do I know my core infrastructure is not also compromised, and looking for some of those things. And that's where I think AI comes in to some degree, is being able to say like, hey, this thing was doing this today and now it's doing this the next day. That's the first thread you might pull to realize that's what's going on. But it's a really tough game.
Is this on like big routers, like Cisco routers, or is this home routers?
A little bit of both. There is a tool that I recall they used in one of the reports. I think it was the Volt Typhoon announcement that was a fairly big one in the first half of the year. I don't remember what month it came out. Q1, end of Q1 maybe. I want to say it was FRP was the name of the tool. And I believe it's something you can just download from GitHub, but it's like full reverse proxy is what it stands for. And they're using this to install on, junk routers and things like that so that they can come from wherever country they're coming from, probably go to a VPN, then bounce through someone's home connection. And that's the tool that lets them do that. and then fire whatever they want through that. And attribution becomes nearly impossible. And if one of those devices gets burnt, then they just move on to the next one. And so, like, of course they're going to do that, right? That's great tradecraft. But, a home user, that's a whole different thing, right? Good luck. No one's ever going to know their home router is compromised, let alone a company, right? So, yeah, I mean, like infrastructure devices, whether they're professional or home class, both of them are an issue.
If I was an adversary, that's what I want. I want the router, because then you could do all types of fancy or simple things. You could do a man on the side attack where you're really sending their encrypted traffic to a different resource. You could be their DNS server, so when they request pages that you're the one providing them the answers. It's just a lot that you could do with having a router. But I also am curious, would we even catch an adversary if they did implant on our works Cisco router that's going out to the internet?
I think most people would not, right? Because not only are they like not being watched probably as well, but even if they are being watched, the kind of things that we've seen for some of those capabilities is like they're changing the checksum value for TCP packets or like whatever, right? It's like, it's not like they're just communicating directly in an obvious way in the things that they're doing. I mean, sometimes they might be, sure, right? There are some fairly logical things you can do in this regard without any special tools. And what I'm always talking about in class is like something that has happened that's never happened before is an interesting thing that you should be looking at. And everyone has, well, that's another thing we can talk about, DOH, right? DNS over HTTPS is also obscuring things. But when people are going to domain names, or your router is generating traffic to domain names it's never talked to before, something is probably potentially up, or IP addresses. Now, of course, like IP addresses is way harder, but the same thing applies with like the SolarWinds breach, right? You have SolarWinds Orion. It probably does roughly the same thing every single day. And then one day back in, was it 2020 or 2021? I'm losing track of years now. It starts talking to the domain avsvmcloud.com. Like that was the command and control domain. So if you had a simple detect of like, my very important server with a lot of privileged access is talking to a domain name that we've never seen anything talk to before. If I Google it, there's no information about it. SolarWinds doesn't say they own it. Like that could be a thing that cracked the case, but it didn't, right? For a long time. I don't know how, I can't remember how it was eventually caught, but certainly like in nearly any compromise, like there's a new IP, a new domain or something involved. So it doesn't have to be like world-class AI mastery to like get some of this stuff caught. It is possible to do if people are watching.
Yeah, I wonder what is the thing that you would look for. Like, I guess it would be a little tough for me to say like, yeah, I'm gonna investigate something that looks so normal. If it looked very normal, what are the things that would catch your interest if you were given a sample of random traffic? Like, what are the things that the indicators that you're looking for that are like, I need to investigate this thing further?
Yeah, the basic idea, and this is kind of true across threat hunting in general, is you are looking at what is a baseline and then where is something new happened. Not everything anomalous is malicious, but nearly everything that's malicious is anomalous in some dimension, but you have to be able to find that dimension, right? So sometimes it's easy and it's the domain name, right? It's never gone to that domain before and it just did. What is that? Other times it's going to be a protocol. It's going to be an IP address, which, everything's going through Cloudflare now. So that becomes a lot more difficult to run IP addresses. It could be the way that it communicated, pattern wise. It could be the time. It could be anything really. It depends. And, how deep you're willing to go is the question. And that's where AI comes in. It's like, there's so many dimensions to these problems is when you have like a 20 dimensional set of data. Like you can't just look at it in a SIM and be like, oh, there's the anomaly. Like you have to bring in model assisted threat hunting to some degree if you really want to get to those super obscure like differences. But a lot of times it doesn't necessarily require that, but depends who you're up against.
Yeah, it could definitely make your life a lot easier going through the blatantly obvious things or the blatantly anomalous things. Like if there was a specific protocol, it's like, hey, this isn't HTTP. It's not DNS. It's not TCP. It's like, all right, so then obviously this is something that the AI doesn't even know about. Maybe I should take a closer look, especially if it's not able to give you a response. One thing that you mentioned that I didn't know about was HTTP 3. And you were saying like this is actually an important thing that people need to brush up on and get some exposure with.
Yeah, absolutely. So the four protocols that I keep talking about, really, HTTP 2, which is not as new, HTTP 3, which is in use but not as widely as HTTP 2. Both of those are always going to be encrypted. But then HTTP 3 specifically uses like an outer wrapper protocol called QUIC, QUIC. And those things, along with DNS over HTTPS, which is just TLS traffic, it's DNS traffic wrapped in web traffic wrapped in TLS is literally what it is, right? All of those things kind of put together have multiple different facets of kind of problem associated with them. One is you won't see it unless you have TLS interception. A lot of companies struggle with that. Assuming you can fully decrypt all of that, then there's the question of, do you know how to do analysis on HTTP 2 and HTTP 3 and QUIC? It is like HTTP 1 that we've all known and loved for many years, but it is significantly different because it throws everything through one TCP stream and it breaks it up into different frames and different streams. And using Wireshark to like take apart and carve a file out of HTTP 2 and 3 is like another skill set. And like I could teach it to you in an hour, right? We go through that in classes, but I find most people haven't seen that before. And then on top of all of that, like QUIC and HTTP 3 is so new that most tools can't even properly dissect it. Like literally Wireshark could not fully make sense out of it and like make it easy to read until version 4.2, which came out in November. So HTTP 3 has been around for years. And like, even if you had it fully decrypted, you would struggle to see it. And again, right, walking around RSA, I kept talking to NDR vendors. I'm like, can you make full sense out of assuming it's decrypted? QUIC and HTTP 3, and a lot of them are like, we have a nice dashboard, right? So like that's what I'm saying is like every time we talk about this, I always tell people like, ask your vendor, can I do this? Assuming you give it decrypted traffic, which is a big if. Are people trained to do it? And then can your tools mass, record what's going on and give you metadata like they would be able to for HTTP 1? And all that makes it very difficult. And then there's DOH, right? Which is like, you might not even control your DNS traffic anymore if you don't do TLS decryption, which is its own other world of issues. So I think there's a lot of these things. And we know, right, that there are QUIC and HTTP 3 enabled post-exploitation like frameworks. So attackers can and do use this. So you might be completely blind to it.
Yeah, if you are doing network inspection and you don't have that skill set, I don't have the skill set to, review HTTP 2 or 3. So like that would definitely throw me for a loop. I've seen the packets as well in Wireshark, and it just looks like, all right, am I dealing with more streams of data or is this all one conversation? Mm-hmm. I wonder, with things like this, what are the popular examples that are out there? Like, is there a website that uses HTTP 2? And also, which malware or adversary groups have used this as a mechanism?
I don't even know if I remember any specific groups off the top of my head. I believe so. There's a website called like the C2 Matrix, and if you go there, you can just like narrow down post-exploitation frameworks for attackers based on what protocol. And I think there's one called like Merlin. I know that pops off the top of my head as like one that supports HTTP 3. But like in terms of websites that use it, like most traffic now is going to try to use HTTP 2 because it is more efficient. And then especially like if you have, I think the clearest example of you're definitely using 3 is like if you have a Chrome, browser and you're going to like Google services, I know all of that is going to be QUIC and HTTP 3. Actually, the really easy way to check is just look at your traffic because it's UDP port 443 traffic. A lot of organizations actually get ahead of it, and you can block QUIC by blocking that port. And that will get ahead of some of those to solve the problem of not being able to take it apart. Many organizations do that. But if you want to see it yourself, I made a video, I think it was like 3 years ago now, on how to, I have it on YouTube, right? If you search my name and HTTP 2 and 3, you'll find it, how to fire up Firefox with an environment variable that will write the TLS keys to like a text file so that you can generate your own traffic and then decrypt your own traffic and practice taking those packets apart.
What I like to do nowadays for wire like sniffing is I created a Chrome extension to where like I can look at all of my browser data and it's just decrypted because I'm looking at it the same way that you look at the network tab in the Chrome developer tools. Mm-hmm. But I think it's still a really important skill to know how to reassemble conversations by just having the packets.
Mhm.
Because I mean that's the most surefire way to know like if something is truly anomalous. Because even the way that I look at it through the Chrome Developer Console is you get some of that information. So I get like all of the layer 7 specific information, but like the layer 4, that's an unknown to me.
Yeah, you're not going to get the quick layer. You're not going to get 4 or 3
quick
or
as
anything.
well.
And so you won't see the full context of what it would look like in an enterprise packet capture unless you do it like the way I was talking about, where you save the pre-master secrets and write it to a file.
Yeah. So looking at, all the things that are out there, especially this new development, for you focus on SOC and cyber defense, what do you see as like a something that you want to double down on over the next few months and learn more about?
I think I mean AI is the obvious answer to that one, unfortunately, right? Certainly I'm constantly exploring that one. To say something further on that I didn't get into before, I think there's a lot of additional use cases in the SOC that I didn't mention that it's super helpful for, right? Building playbooks, building automation workflow ideas, reading your incident reports and saying what's in here that I, forgot, or what's not in here that I may have forgotten could add to make it more effective, right? There's just tons and tons of things, literally every step, right? The big challenge is like remembering, I could use AI to make this better in a lot of cases. Beyond that, I think a lot of interesting stuff to me now is looking at the types of data that are being generated in the cloud, the identity plane, everything that's like Entra ID, how people are logging in and breaking in, and now how phishing resistant credentials are going to largely get in the way of a lot of what traditionally has worked and what the attacks are going to shift to. One of the interviews I've already pre-recorded for my podcast is with some of the folks at Microsoft on phishing resistant credentials and how that gets in the way of that. And so I think like helping companies turn on and enable like Windows Hello for Business is a really fruitful avenue for SOCs to help with. It's not going to be something they do, but like understanding what's left as an attack path and some of those things with these new ways of logging in and how credentials are going to get stolen after that, right? I think is going to be everyone loves credential attacks, so it'll morph, and we kind of have some ideas of where it's going to go. But that's the other thing I've been kind of chasing down.
So for anyone that hasn't done so already, be sure to check out the SANS Cyber Defense curriculum. John, for anyone that wants to learn more about the curriculum or even just step right into it, what would be the first course or part that you would recommend for them to review and research?
So depending on where people start, right, there's a whole bunch of different places you can go. We have our on-road kind of courses, which is 301 and 401. Those are like the broad kind of little bit of everything classes. If you already have a decent understanding of security, if you want to get into the security operations space, there's my class, which is Sec 450 Blue Team Fundamentals. This is like for SOC analysts, early on in the job. Sec 511 is our, I would say, senior analyst in threat hunting and cybersecurity engineering kind of course. You want to get really, really good with packet captures. 503 is a great one. That's the one that's going to tell you how to pick up some of that crazy stuff we were talking about. 595 is the one that would go with that has more of the Python and AI pieces to it. But we got automation courses for people who are interested in that. We got, I mentioned the cyber supply chain class. 2 OSINT classes by an amazing individual. Matt Edmondson wrote 497 and 587, our advanced OSINT course. We have a lot of different kind of career paths. So I would say once someone has a foot in the door with a generalist class, it would be a case of select what job role you would like to be an expert in. And then are you early stage in that or later stage in that? And I'm always happy to help people find the right class for them. And we have tons of like various, I would say, infographics and things like that on the site to get people in the right place. And another thing people don't know, right? If you sign up for a class and you're like, this is totally the wrong class for me, just let us know and like we'll get you in the right one. We don't want you to be in the wrong classroom. So
clutch. That is amazing. And yeah, if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out the SANS Cyber Defense curriculum. Also, stay up to date and in touch with John Hubbard, my special guest. You can find his socials in the show notes and description wherever you're listening or watching. John, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day to jump on the mics, talk about one of my favorite subjects of AI. And with that, we will see everyone next time.